Long ago, along Ghana's peaceful shores, walls were built not just from stones, but from stories, pain, and power. Some of these castles became famous, but were forgotten, left to fade into the silence of time. Hidden behind small fishing towns and quiet hills are forces most Ghanaians have never seen before. Each one holds secret of gold, trade, and human struggle. Stories that shape who we are today. In this video, we uncover Ghana hidden castles you have never seen before. Get ready, because what you are about to see will change how you see Ghana's history forever. Our journey begins at a quiet coastal town called Dixcove, hidden deep in Ghana's western region. Here on top of a small hill stands one of the oldest and the most powerful forts built in Ghana, Fort Metal Cross. From the outside, it looked calm, painted white and bright against the blue ocean. But behind those walls are stories of gold, trade, and pain that shaped Ghana's history. Fort Metal Cross was built by the British around 1690 to control trade along the coast. At first, ships came here for gold, ivory, and spices, the kind of words that made Europeans fight for power in West Africa. But over time, the trade turned dark. The same fort that once stored gold began to hold people. Africans were captured, locked inside tiny dark rooms with no windows, waiting to be sent across the ocean as slaves. You can still see the chains, the thick walls, and the narrow doors. Silent witness of what really happened here. The fort was attacked many times by rival European forces, but it always stood strong. It was later taken over by the Dutch, who renamed it Metallic Cross, meaning Metal Cross. That's where the name Fort Metal Cross came about. After years of war and trade, it finally came back under British control in 1872. Today, the fort is one of Ghana's UNESCO World Heritage Sites. Protected for its historical importance, it has served as a police station, a post office, and now as a tourist site. When you visit, you can walk through its old rooms, climb to the rooftop and see the ocean stretch endlessly into the horizon. It is peaceful now, but when the wind blows through the corridors, it feels like the fort is still whispering stories from hundreds of years ago. Fort Metal Cross isn't just a building, it is a reminder of Ghana's strength, survival, and unbreakable spirit. If you have ever traveled along Ghana's central region, you will find a quiet town called Abanzi, and sitting on a hill above the sea is a massive old fort, Fort Amsterdam. From far away, it looked calm and peaceful, but this place has seen more than 3 centuries of power, greed, and pain. This fort was first built by the English in the early 16th, and it was known as Fort Kumasi. It wasn't just a fort, it was a symbol of power. English traders came here to buy gold and ivory, but before long, something darker began: the buying and selling of human lives. The fort became the first place where Africans were locked up, waiting to be sent across the Atlantic as slaves. It is said that the first slave prison on the Gold Coast was inside Fort Amsterdam. Then came the Dutch, led by Admiral Michael de Ruyter, who captured the fort in 1665. They rebuilt it, made it stronger, and gave it a new name, Fort Amsterdam. For almost 200 years, it changed hands between European powers, each one using it for trade, war, and control. But history has a strange way of balancing things. In 1811, the local people of Anomabu attacked the fort and left it in ruins. It stood empty for years. Broken walls, failing roofs, and silence. Where once there was noise and fear, today Fort Amsterdam still stands, old but proud. Its walls may be cracked and its floors covered in dark, but every stone tells a story. When you walk through the narrow passages, you can almost feel the whispers of those who once passed through its gates. And when you stand on the rooftop and look out to the sea, it feels like the fort is watching over the waves, remembering everything that once happened there. Fort Amsterdam isn't just a building, it is a mirror of Ghana's past. It reminds us of the strength of the people who survived the pain and the beauty of a land that never forgets its history. Long before Cape Coast and Elmina became famous, there was a fort, St. Antony, the first ever fort built by the Europeans on the Gold Coast, standing proudly in the coastal town of Azim. This ancient fortress has been watching the sea since 1515, over 500 years ago. It all began when the Portuguese arrived, drawn by gold and ivory. They built the fort and named it after St. Antony of Padua, a symbol of their power along the coast. The walls were strong, the canoes pointed toward the sea, but behind its beauty was a darker story. Inside those cold stone walls, many Africans were chained, waiting to be sold and shipped away. The fort became one of the earliest centers of Atlantic slave trade, and every wall still carries echoes of those who never returned. Later, the Dutch took over in the 16th, expanding it, and the British claimed it in the 18th. prove it all, Fort St. Anthony never lost its power or purpose. Today, it still stands tall, a mix of beauty, history, and pain. From the top, you can see fishing boats dancing on the same waves that once carried ship of gold and ship of sorrow. Fort St. Anthony remains one of Ghana's best preserved forts, a living reminder of trade, struggle, and survival. Even after 5 centuries, it stands strong, remembering us never to forget where it all began. In the heart of Kumasi stands a fortress, the Kumasi Fort and the Military Museum. Unlike the forts along the coast, this one sits deep inland, right in the capital of the Ashanti Kingdom. It was first built in 1820 by the Great Ashanti Kingdom by Osei Tutu Kwamena. He wanted to create a fort that matched the mighty European ones, built with granite and brown soil brought all the way from Cape Coast. It stood as a symbol of Ashanti's strength and pride, but that pride was soon tested. In 1874, during the British invasion, the fort was destroyed. Years later, it was rebuilt, stronger than ever in 1897. Then in 1900, the famous Yasantua War broke out. The Queen Mother Yasantua led the Asante people in a fierce battle against the British, who were hiding inside this very fort. For weeks, she kept them trapped, one of the boldest uprisings in African history. Today, the fort still stands not as a battleground, but as the Kumasi Military Museum. Inside, you'll find medals and armored vehicles used in the Second World War. Each war, each canoe, and each display whispers stories of bravery, sacrifice, and resistance. When you walk through its gates, you don't just see a museum. You step into the heart of the Ashanti Kingdom, a place where history lives. The Kumasi Fort and Military Museum isn't just about war. It is about courage, pride, and a nation's unbreakable road to stand. In the fishing village of Benin near Ghana's western border stands a fort that has seen the rise and fall of empires, Fort Apollonia. It is not just a building of stones, it is a symbol of power, trade, and survival. But what makes Fort Apollonia special? The story of this fort began in 1768, when the Dutch built it to protect their gold and trade routes from rival powers. But what makes Fort Apollonia special is its transformation over time, from a fortress of war to a museum of peace. In those early years, the fort thick white walls were used to store goods like gold and sadly enslave Africans. It was built close to the sea so ships could easily load and sail. Every corner of this fort has a story of traders shouting orders, soldiers standing guard, and local people forced into chains. But after years of power and struggle, everything changed. When the British took over in 1872, the slave trade had already ended. The fort slowly began forgotten, left to the mercy of sea breeze and rain. For more than a century, it stood quietly, empty and abandoned, and almost buried by time. Then something amazing happened. In the early 2000s, the Ghana Museum and Monument Board decided to bring it back to life. With the help of UNESCO, Fort Apollonia was carefully restored. The broken walls was rebuilt, and the fort was turned into Nzima Museum of History and Culture. Today, when you walk inside, you don't just see old canoes or walls. You see the story of the Nzima people, their king's culture and tradition. The same place that once held pain and fear now tells stories of pride and identity. Standing on its rooftop, you can watch the sunset over the Atlantic Ocean. The same view sailors saw 100 years ago, but this time the feeling is different. It is peaceful, hopeful, and alive. It proves that even the darkest places can shine again. In the quiet seaside town of Apam, there is a small white fort sitting high on a rocky hill. It is called Fort Patience, a name that perfectly fits its story. When the Dutch started building it in 1697, everything went wrong. Workers got sick, materials ran out, and argument broke out with locals and chiefs. The project took years instead of months, and the Dutch had to wait and wait, so they named it Fort Patience. When it was finally finished in 1702, the fort became a trading post for gold and sadly enslaved Africans. It may look peaceful now, but long ago, it witnessed pain and suffering behind its thick stone walls. The British later captured it in 1982, and over time, it was used as a police station, a post office, and even a guest house. Today, it still stands, small, quiet, and proud, overlooking the sea like it has been waiting all along. Fort Patience isn't just a fort, it is a lesson that sometimes the strongest things in life are the ones that take time. On the beautiful coast of Anamabu, there stands a giant white fort that looks calm and quiet. But behind its thick walls lies one of the darkest stories in Ghana's history. This is Fort William. It was first built by the Dutch in the 1640s, but the English took over and rebuilt it in 1753, calling it Fort Anomoba. It later became known as Fort William, named after King William IV. From the outside, it looked like just another seaside building, but what happened inside was far from peaceful. Long ago, this fort was one of the busiest, villages, slave trading centers on the entire Gold Coast. Thousands of African men and women and even children were captured from nearby towns and villages and brought here. They were locked in dark underground cells, packed tightly with barely any air or light. Many never made it out alive. From this fort alone, it is believed that more than 30,000 Africans were shipped across the Atlantic to the Caribbeans and the Americans, to places like Jamaica and Barbados. That's over 30,000 lives, 30,000 dreams, and 30,000 families torn apart forever. The fort also saw many battles. In 1794, it was attacked by the French. Then in the 80s, the powerful Ashanti army came and forced the British to surrender. For a long time after that, the fort was left damaged and quiet. But even after the slave trade ended, Fort William continued to hold pain. It was later used as a state prison where prisoners were kept until as late as 2001. Imagine a place that once held slaves still holding prisoners just over 20 years ago. When you walk through its old rooms, you can still feel the weight of history. The thick wall may be cracked, but they still whisper stories of courage. Standing by the ocean, Fort William reminds us of where we came from and how far we have come. It is not just a building, it is a symbol of surviving. The waves may wash its walls every day, but they can never wash away its stories. If you are inspired by this video, then you have to watch this one right here, the top 7 richest kings in Ghana 2025.